a woman conceives, the older Zachar, she gives birth to a son. So Chazal tell us, our sages tell us, the Gemara tells us, Anida, Isha Mazarat Tchila Yolad Zachar, Isha Mazarat Tchila Yolad Nekeva. That if the woman is aroused first, Isha Mazarat Tchila, then the child that would be conceived will be a male child, and if the opposite, it will be a female child. So it's known that there's two types of waters that speaks about in Sefer Kabbalah and works of Kabbalah. In Sefer Chassidus is something that's called Mayim Duchrin or Mayim Nukvin. Mayim Duchrin means masculine water, and Mayim Nukvin is feminine waters. These correspond to different spheres, but they also correspond to the male and the female. So Chazal, in the language of Chazal, that when there's a situation where Isha Mazarat Tchila, when there was an arousal of the female, a Mayim Nukvim prior, then the child that will give birth, the child that will be born will be Zachar. And if there's arousal from the male first, from the Ish, then the child will be the Keva, will be feminine. So Baal Shem Tov teaches this understanding in Avodah, in a personal work in a service between him and Hashem, that it's like this. There are two types of Isaiahs, there's two types of arousal a person can have. One is, a person thinks about their life. A person does a cheshbon nefesh, a person does an accounting to themselves, thinks about their life, where they're holding in their life, what they want to achieve in this world. And they come to a serious tshuva, they come to a certain awakening of tshuva, that they feel like, it's enough sitting and wallowing in my smallness, constriction, and darkness. I want to feel connected, I want to feel more, I want to be higher. And they awaken and have a strong desire to change their life, take steps to change their life. This is the serious that comes, an awakening that comes from within us. Just by thinking about your life, and no matter how high you are and how deep you are, there's always room to grow. We can never be content. We always have to strive for higher. And a person says, I want to have a real tshuva, I want to have a real awakening, a real connection. This is a Syrus, this is a type of awakening that comes from below. When the Syrus comes from below, then it's Mayim Nukvim, which is the feminine waters are aroused first, which draws down the Mayim Duchrin, which brings down the masculine waters, and therefore the birth is Zachar v'Rachmim. The birth of this child, of this awakening, will be something that's stable, Zachar, masculine, and this image represents something that's permanent, and something that's connected to Rachmim, compassion. There's no din connected to it, which means when the awakening comes from within us, the end result will be that it's real growth. Then there's another type of awakening, something that happens from a type of external awakening. It could be something you saw. Maybe you were in some type of traumatic experience. You went through something, some life challenging experience, or you saw something that really shook you up. But it's not that you decided at some point in your life that you really want to do something with your life, that you really want to change, but something was externally imposed and you saw it, and because of that you were awakened. And therefore you decide to change your life course. Says the Baal Shem Tov, such a type of Hisoirus, such a type of an awakening, the birth of that awakening, if it's Ish Mazarat Tchila, if the above aroused the below, which means something external was imposed upon you, and then the below was aroused, but it came through the above, then what's created, the child, the energy, the quality that's created through this arousal will be temporary, will be fickle, will be, at best, last a few days, maybe last even a few years, but ultimately it will fade and you'll go back to your previous behaviors. because it wasn't something that was aroused through you. It was something that was induced, externally induced. This could be friends. Let's say all your friends you're living a certain way, and then your friends decide to live a certain way, and you just follow along. So it wasn't that you decided and you yearned for it and you created it. It was created for you. So this change that happens, there'll be a birth. There'll be a birth of a child. There'll be something new that will come into this world, but the child will be impermanence. It'll last. There'll be a lot of dinim, a lot of constrictions. A lot of times you'll feel like, what am I doing with my life? Why did I really change? Why did I take on this new path of my life? Because it wasn't created through you. So now the question becomes, what happens if you weren't thinking to change your life, to really, and it doesn't mean dramatic changes, any serious tshuva, even if you're living a righteous life, so you want to just grow, and that awakening does come from outside of you. Let's say you're living a good righteous life, a holy life, a noble life, committed life, a Yiddish life, and then you see something that really shakes you to the core, and you say, I'm not doing enough, I really should be even higher, I should really even be deeper. So the Cyrus, the awakening came from above. And you know that when awakening comes from above, it's not going to last. It'll produce a child that won't be permanent. How do you make this permanent? So the Baal Shem Tov says that you can actually, there's something what you can do. You could own that experience. How do you own that experience, even though you didn't create the experience? If you tell yourself, if you think to yourself, it says, look at my life. I was living my life in a certain direction. Then all of a sudden this experience happened. And because of that, I'm shook into the core that I should live higher. But I needed something outside me to really shake me. And now I really understand that I really, really should be so much more. And then you start, in the language of Baal Shem, you cry. Why are you crying? You're crying, yibcha, you're crying for the fact that you didn't create this arousal, that it didn't come from you, that you needed your friends to inspire you, or you needed some type of traumatic event in history, or something happened outside of you to shake you. And you say, it's so unfortunate to myself, thinking to your own self, how that I wasn't able to be in the right place to really feel that I really need change in my life. And if a person cries, here's like an interesting metaphor. The crying itself, the tears, becomes the mayim duchrim. Becomes the mayim nukvim. That itself becomes the feminine waters. And that's the way you own the experience. So let's say very simply. Let's say you're living your life, and then something happens. Something happens to a family member, God forbid, or something happens. It could be a positive thing or a very negative thing. Something happens dramatic in your life, and all of a sudden it shakes you and says, I should really think about my life more deeply. I can't just cruise through life. I should really do something much more. And then you think to yourself, but I want this real experience, this arousal, this awakening that I have to really be permanent. I don't just want to be now around because, I just went through this traumatic experience, so now I'm all of a sudden changing my life. But I know that in a year from now, I'm going to go back to my previous life. I really want to own it. I want it to come through my mind, nukvim, through my feminine waters. Says the Baal Shem, own it. You could own it, even if it happens to you. Own it by telling yourself, I should have really created it. And if that causes tears and some type of arousing, some type of movement within you, that you should have been there, and I should have really realized that my life is not going in the right direction. I should have really realized that I could have lived more. That's how you own the experience. And by owning the experience, you create the arousal. And by you creating the arousal, the child that's born and the movement that's created and the new life that is being birthed will be a permanent and a lasting effect in your life. Tell me, you can.